Hey, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Amy.
Welcome to United Humans, a podcast that goes into the personal lives of our 6,000 plus volunteer medics and their families.
75-year-old male, possible cardiac arrest.
My name is Gabi Friedson.
I'm Dina. This is Ronnie. We're a couple.
I'm Vicky.
United Hatzalah's only mission is saving lives, and we'll discuss how that doesn't leave room for discrimination against color, race, religion, or sexual orientation.
Let's talk about fear, trauma, pain, and connection.
Join us. Let's discuss these diverse volunteers from all across the country. Hello, our listeners. Welcome back to United Humans, a podcast where we go into our 6,200 volunteers' lives, but not all at once. That would be very overwhelming. One at a time. And today we have someone who I'm just so, thank you so much for coming. Erev Pesach, Erev craziness, as we are all dealing with at the moment. But I really think it was so important that you came in because you're just, first of all, you just have so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and I think you're like the perfect match for the topic of what we're trying to do today, which is really about, in honor of Yom Ha'atzmaut, an Ola's experience of coming to Israel, making that decision to live the rest of your life in what is essentially a foreign country. And we want to hear about your experiences. And of course, I'm sitting with Amy, my co-host.
Shalom, shalom.
And Brenda. We didn't say what your name is.
Yeah, I'm so happy that Brenda's
Brenda
here.
Horwitz-Prawer. Horwitz-Prawer. That's also a story about Aliyah in Israel and your name.
Ooh, we'll get there. Okay. So Brenda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I guess a good place to start is where you made Aliyah from. If you want to tell us where you came from and when you made Aliyah, or maybe how it is that you came to making Aliyah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm from Denver. I'm a Denverite. 1979, I think. Finished Beis Yaakov. There's a small Beis Yaakov in Denver. And everyone usually goes for a year afterwards to Israel, to seminary, right? And I'm like, I don't want to go to seminary. I want to do something different because that's what I do. And I decided I was going to go to Stern College for a year. And I went to Stern that year afterwards, after I graduated Beis Yaakov. And I'm looking around what's going on in New York because I understand in Denver it's going to be really hard. Although some people go back and lived in Denver and made their lives in Denver, I just felt for me it would be very hard for me to go back there, even though I love Denver very much. And looking around New York City, and I'm like, this is not me. I'm not into the it's just not me. And it's great. And it's an amazing Jewish communities there. And it's fantastic. But I'm more of a Denver girl. So I decide the next year I'm going to go to Israel. I'm going to go to Seminary. I'm going to go to Bravenders where they learn Gemara, which in 1980 was not something that women did.
Just going to say,
that was a year that,
for a text-based.
Right. Also from Beis Yaakov, it wasn't things that people did. And it was this radical.
Rebellious.
And now I don't feel like it was so radical, but at the time it was pretty radical, I guess. And it was the second machzor there. It was the second year of the program in Bravenders. And I decided I'm going to go. And just around the block from Ichud here, they were in Kiryat Moshe. And I went to Bravenders. And that was basically the first time I was ever in Israel. I had never been. I'd never come on any trips. My family had been. I couldn't come. And it was an amazing, amazing experience. And I would even say that my first few days, when you're coming from America, I see all these newspapers on the floor, right? Newspapers. And I'm saying, the Lashon HaKodesh is on the floor, on the streets. And so the first few days of me in Israel, I'm picking up the newspapers from the streets saying, Lashon HaKodesh can't be on the streets. So that's what I did my first few days in Israel.
Amazing. People thought you were nuts.
Nuts. I'm like, what is this on the floor? Look at the Lashon, how could it be? And they're like, it's a newspaper. I'm like, no, it's...
That's a really awesome way of looking at it. I mean, I love that.
Yeah. I said, where's Geniza? And they're like, in the garbage. Put it in the garbage. I'm like, what? That was my first...
That's another conversation.
That's another...
Newspapers belong in the garbage. Which ones?
Right.
So you really came to Israel with innocent eyes. You didn't know what to expect. It was a
like a brand new world for you.
There was two things I thought: that I could marry every man in this country. That was a very exciting thought. And I had no idea. I really had no idea what it meant. I just know that, on the way over, I was on a plane that was hit by lightning. And the whole plane, it was an intense experience. I'm not a great flyer after that. And I mean, on the plane, I was like, I just got to get to Israel. Like, it can't be that I'm not going to, I waited all this time and I'm not going to get here. So once we landed, Hodu Hashem Ki Tov, I was just felt real bracha that I was here, not knowing any idea what Israel was.
And you were about 20 years old?
I was 18.
18.
What was your education until then in terms of Zionism, Israel?
So I was raised in basically, Denver's a really small community. So we had the Hillel for elementary, and then we had Beis Yaakov, which is totally not Zionistic.
Yeah, it's
in other words,
Litvish, yeshivish.
Right. But I was in Bnei Akiva. We had like 5 people in the Shevet. And, on Yom Ha'atzmaut, we would say Tikva, behind the building and go in and say we davened with the bracha, whatever. But my parents were Zionistic, and but the education that I had every day wasn't.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that.
Right. But I do have to say they do have a great love for Eretz Yisrael and Eretz HaKodesh, and so you have that too. So it's built in within that.
Right.
But none of our friends. I mean, I think after a year of being in Bravenders, I said to my parents, I want to stay. Now, everybody wants to stay after the first year of Seminary. You guys know that. And all the parents said, you come back and do university, and then you come back, and then you can come back. And my parents said, what is a chut? That our child wants to live in Israel. And that gave me the...
So you never went back?
Never went back.
Wow. So what happened after seminary?
So after seminary, I figured, now what do? I don't speak Hebrew. I'm getting on buses saying, Havieni Nina, talking to them in Lashon HaKodesh. No, but I was talking more Torah, like a wonder pot. I was saying, Ha'im yesh l'chasir shoseh plaim, or
So for those of us not familiar,
Very formal.
Hebrew, yeah, that's like biblical Hebrew.
Biblical Hebrew. I was talking
Hebrew.
biblical Hebrew, and they're all looking at me and laughing. And I decided all my life I loved children, and I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher in my dream job. And so I found a school that was willing, that only spoke no English, not a word of English. Nobody spoke English there, except the principal. It's not the principal. I guess it's the menahel. I don't know how to say it, of this seminar. And I started learning to be a kindergarten teacher in Hebrew without knowing a word of Hebrew, basically. I mean, I could read Hebrew, but I didn't know Israeli Hebrew.
Right.
And there was 12 of us in the class, and they didn't know a word of English. And they helped me. I helped them.
Wow.
That's how you learn.
That's how you learn.
Yeah.
And it was hard, and I cried a lot. And sometimes the Israeli teachers were horrible. But I pretty much, and I think this is something I say to people when they come to Israel, you got to look at the long road. You can't look at all the noise that hits you. So whatever, doesn't beat you down makes you stronger. Like, I'm a tough Israeli now.
Yeah.
You don't want to meet me in a dark alley,
Yeah, you have that scary look
Yeah,
too.
I'm scary. Yeah, I got a mouth with the Israeli thing.
So what happens next?
So I start learning to be a kindergarten teacher. The kindergarten teachers that I'm studying with are like, that's not how you read, and I have to change from mil el to mil ra. I have to change everything.
You have to change bark, bark, woof, woof to have, have.
No, I have to change when there's wind, roo, roo, roo to roo, roo. And I'm like, they're saying, I'm like, roo. Like,
The roo
Right,
to
and-
the
right. I'm being told to go to the Makolet, and I'm reading, Makolet is with a kaf and not with a kuf, and I'm going to the bomb shelters, which are miklatim, because it's with a kuf, and I'm saying there's no food in the bomb shelters. Why is there no milk section? Because I'm reading it wrong. Like, I'm just really kind of figuring it all out. And At the same time, I meet my husband, who's an Olim from Australia, Jeff Prawer, a wonderful man. We're just married now 37 years.
Oh my
Wow,
God!
that's
What?
Good.
I'm shocked. Just so the listeners understand, we are not looking at a woman who's been married for 37 years. What the?
And so we're just trying to make it work here for us. I get a job as being a first grade teacher. I do not know how to teach Hebrew. I do not know how to teach reading. I do not know how to teach writing. My Hebrew is boys and girls, mixed genders, mixed up. Someone just said they heard that I was a good ganenet, kindergarten teacher, but I never really was a kindergarten teacher, so I don't really know where they heard that from. And that's how I start getting into the educational system, where I'm teaching children how to read. I will put in that I'm very dyslexic. I learned to read in 6th grade. They took me from the religious school to a church, and I was taught in a church how to read. And now I'm trying to learn how to teach kids how to read, and I have not learned how to do it.
Wow, no, because being a ganenet and then teaching first grade is totally different.
Totally different.
Wow.
And I'm with an experience of failing in reading. I was a non-reader. So now I have to teach children, and I have no idea, and they send me someone to help me, and the first 3 months were disastrous, and then something clicked in my head. I said, it's either now or never, girl, and became a very good first grade teacher.
Succeeded.
Yeah, thank God.
Incredible.
Thank God.
Did your dyslexia come up at all in terms of learning to read Hebrew, or is it just mainly with English?
No, whenever you have a learning disability, it'll go straight through the languages. It doesn't matter. If you're dyslexic, you're dyslexic. Actually, Hebrew's easier because it's phonetic.
Right.
So it's an easier reading process. If you listen to me reading English, it's a pretty scary experience. My husband used to say he cringed, right? And I'm like, go easy on me. But the Hebrew is a little bit easier. But and it's also, I was learned in the Haredi way, which is
And not
it's
tuh.
not not even that. No, it's not globally. It's not gestalt. You're learning letter, vowel, Nekudot. And so it's easier. It was better for me, I guess.
So what year are we talking now? You're married, you're a first grade teacher. And
We're talking 1984, 85. We moved to Ma'aleh Adumim, which was about a settlement of less than 1,000 people, 2 buses a day. We have no money. We're not having any support from home.
Just to give our listeners some context here. How many people are in Ma'aleh Adumim today?
40,000.
40,000. And you were there when there was less than 1,000.
Right. My bank account is 920 something, right? So
wow.
There were only 2 buses,
So you're
one
a
in the morning.
pioneer. You're a trailblazer.
Well, we were there because we had no money, but it was, there's 2 buses a day, one in the morning, one in the evening. We have no bus, no car. We don't have no air conditioning. We're in the desert.
Yeah, I was saying, did you move there for financial reasons, or you like the desert, beautiful views near the Dead Sea?
Well,
or both?
it was funny. I had once with a boyfriend, not my husband. We had walked from the Kotel to the Mishor Adumim, which is near Ma'aleh Adumim, 9 hours. There was nothing there. It helps me a lot when people from BDS come to Ma'aleh Adumim. I talk to them and I say, you should know, I walked this. There was nothing here. Wow. Don't fool yourself. Nobody was here. Maybe one little dog, but that was it. So, I use that now when people come from America, from all over the world to hear about Ma'aleh Adumim, then I do talk about that. We came financially mostly. We wanted to live in remote. We couldn't afford it. And thank God, it was, but it was definitely, coming to Israel. My Hebrew was getting a little better by then. But we're by ourselves. We're starting to start a family. We have nobody with us. You didn't have emails. You only have regular phones. Very expensive to call. Right. Every minute is like dollars running through. And so you have 2 little kids just trying to make it work, but not scared to look like idiots.
Wow. What was your husband doing at the time?
So he was learning to be, he was a neurophysiologist, he was doing his master's and doctorate in that.
In English?
In Hebrew English. And he was in Bar Ilan and in Hebrew University. And it was, he wasn't part of the clique, the academic clique. And so that was really hard. And so we had no money. We worked 3 or 4 jobs and just, plugging along.
How often were you able to call home, speak to your parents?
So we called, I wrote letters.
What's that? I'm just kidding.
We used to have little blue letters. They're like these little, very light. They didn't weigh a lot, so they didn't cost money. And they didn't have an envelope. You would write on them and then fold them and then put a glue on them, and then you would send them, and it was much cheaper. And so I would say maybe once a month, once every 2 months.
You called.
We called. They called.
But what kept the both of you in Israel? Because today it's hard in different ways to make Aliyah. I mean, me and Sarah both made Aliyah around 10 years ago with different challenges.
When did you make Aliyah?
2011.
I made Aliyah in 2007.
Okay, so a little bit before me.
Just a little detail.
But what do you think drove the both of you to want to stay when things were hard and you had no money and you're just trying to get by? And
I think when you're when you're clear that this is where your it's all based on life, is what your values are, right? If you understand what your value is, then you can deal with a lot of different things. So for me, being part of Eretz Yisrael and being part of that settlement and part of saying, I'm going to make it here. And yes, sometimes I'll say something to you as a man, even though you're a woman. My Hebrew will all get mixed up, but I'm here and I believe I can make a difference. So there is a sense of where you feel about your self-esteem. In other words, I think today, looking back, I felt like I have what to contribute to this country. And so a lot of times when people leave, they feel that they're either transparent, because they feel transparent, or because they don't feel that their being here makes a difference. And I think from a very young age, with all my learning issues and with everything, I felt like I can make a difference. And I think that's a message that people have to understand when they come to Israel. Even if you're like the littlest, Borg screw in the system, it's an important part of the system. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very, very important. And so we didn't mind that we didn't have, I don't say we didn't mind, right? But we felt that, wow, we're part of building Israel and we're part of being here. And what is a chut to do that?
Merit. What a merit.
What a merit, yeah, sorry.
I have so many questions, but I want to hear, first of all, did you feel that people looked at you like you were stupid, naive, silly for coming here? Or did they have the respect for you as wow, you came, you left the gold and the riches that are in the streets of New York?
Right, Denver, right. The snow in Denver, right.
They don't even know what Denver is.
So I think it goes in two different, it goes in, I would say 2 different categories, maybe 3 categories. First category is the people that share that value of Eretz Yisrael. So they're like, it's fantastic you're here, it's good you're here, it's important you're here. And then you have the Israelis that, not all Israelis obviously, but some Israelis that were struggling. And they're like, why would you want to be here and struggle, right? And some of them, and then you have the Americans that's a whole different category with Americans who don't want to integrate into Israeli society, and you have the Americans that integrate into into Israeli society. So the people that don't integrate into Israeli society, they're coming from a whole different fear factor of how they'll sound, their Hebrew will sound, and they're very frightened of feeling stupid or looking stupid. I have no problem looking stupid. So when I wanted to learn Hebrew, I would learn words and I would go to the shuk, because the people in the shuk won't say you're stupid. And I would start using my Hebrew. Now, they wouldn't correct me because they didn't know themselves half the time. But it was a sense that I could practice.
Wow.
So I would say that it's different categories. And you have the Israelis who think, wow, kol hakavod, you're doing it great. That's cool.
Everything you just said, I feel the same.
Yeah.
It's the same today. I also practiced in the shuk in the beginning because, I didn't know where else to. You're right. They wouldn't call. No one would ever call you stupid, and it really depends on the value system, how people,
A lot of people, when I first made Aliyah, would be like, Israelis, like, why? Like, they really didn't understand. Like, why would you come here? Why would you choose to leave? Like, they were missing that inherent concept of like, no, this is our land and we want to be here from whether it's biblical, spiritual, and even if it's just cultural, like totally. People say, oh, I want to live in, I don't know, Uganda, right?
Italy, right?
Right. Like, so why is that any different? But
well, I say to people, if you look, we're like number 9 on the happy list of the countries. We were 11, so we've moved up.
Oh, that's
so
good.
I say to people, in America, if you say you need help, people keep walking. Here you say you need help, you will have so many people helping you. You're not going to find that anywhere,
right.
But
there are many aspects.
There are many,
like that
and people with their families, and everybody with their issues. So
yeah,
it's,
they said it's I also read those lists, and they said it's about community.
Totally.
You wouldn't think that Israel would be number 9. We
No,
have
you
wars
wouldn't.
here. Financially, it's still difficult. A lot of the challenges that you are speaking about in the early 80s still exist till today for Olim. Right. So how are we on number 9?
How are we number 9? Because we're, with the people, families and together. I mean, but I don't know if people who don't integrate in the Israeli society, how they feel. But like, I have all these Israeli friends and, we're together and I love it. And like, they'll make my kids who they would say to me, Ima, your food has no taste and no smell, right? Because I'm used to the fast food, American fast food. They would go to Sima, their neighbor, and have kube and all the food. And so all the American kids would be at Sima's house eating real food.
Do you still feel like an American in Israel? Or have you like fully turned into Kilu an Israeli? Like, you're still American, but do you identify as an Israeli now?
Yeah, I'm totally more Israeli. I think I'm much more, as you say, in your face. I think it's my personality, too. I think in America, I would have had a hard time succeeding because I'm too blunt, I just say what I see, for good and for bad. Yeah, I think I'm pretty Israeli. I like that. Yeah, I think so.
So what happened next professionally? Talk us through the next professional
Okay, so I was a first grade teacher for 15 years. I became very well known. I took my experience of being dyslexic and took my experience of learning and really just was only a first grade teacher. Usually in Israel the teacher goes up with them, the homeroom teacher goes up with them first and second grade. And I just stayed in first grade. So I became really proficient in learning how to teach reading and writing. And after 15 years, I felt like, well, I'm ready to maybe try and be a principal. I'd already done all the academic studies that I needed to do.
You had your degrees?
Yeah, I had all my degrees. Did my my master's in educational administration.
In Hebrew?
In Hebrew.
Wow. Where?
Hebrew U. It's all about how much work you're willing to put into it. It's all about the work. If you're willing to work on it, and I can't say I always feel stupid, right? There were some funny things that 60 people were laughing at me. I laugh at it now too, but I feel like this is my goal. Okay, so they're laughing. I'll call Beseder.
Wow.
And I went to a school that they wanted to close, and nobody wanted to be the principal there because they were closing, and there was all these issues. And
you thought, that's the
perfect place for me.
In Ma'aleh Adumim.
In Ma'aleh Adumim. And they basically, I think nobody wanted it. And they were going to close it the next year. Like they said, you're coming for a year.
This is a small little Jewish settlement that is smack in the middle of our lovely neighbors.
Right. No, it's good. It's good. It's
elementary school or?
Elementary.
Okay.
And so they had 50 kids from first to sixth grade, which was nothing. We were in caravans. And I said, I have nothing to lose. But they are over my body. Are they going to close it on my watch? It's not going to happen. And 5 years later, Moti Yogev, who was at the time not a Chaver Knesset, not a Knesset member, he was part of that. So he came to me, he goes, Brenda, I had over 200 students, and he said, we're giving you the okay to build a building now.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks later, I said, I'm finished.
What?
Yes, because I said my job was to make that settlement feel, I don't know if it's a settlement, if that's the right word politically, but that settlement to feel good about themselves, to feel that they can succeed. We got 200 kids. People were starting to come back to the school. We got the building. I did what I had to do. That's what I had to do. I had to get them on the map.
Why not stick around to reap your...
Because that wasn't my job. My job was to get them on the map. In my vision, listening to the way they were talking to each other, all their issues, they're amazing people. But it was just so complicated. I said, my job here is to get this school on the map. And I got it on the map, and everybody was shocked. And so it was like 5.5 years. And then I took a year off, and I learned city planning. And then they said in Ma'aleh...
Like urban development?
Urban development. And that really interested me. But I really miss going back to being a school principal. I liked being a principal. I enjoyed it. It was challenging. It was bringing in new ideas. I don't think according like every Israeli principal. I'm kind of a little bit of a weird bird. And I said, okay, let's try it. So in Ma'aleh Adumim, there was a school that was failing. And they said, I said, okay, I'm going to try for it. Now, I've never taught in high school or junior high. I've never managed, it's a different managerial experience. I said, they're not going to take me anyway. I'm just going to go for it and get myself back into interviewing for schools. Well, after 15 interviews, I said I didn't even interview my husband this much. I got the job. Now, and everyone said to me, you're committing suicide. Like, nobody succeeded. They've already had 3 principals. Nobody succeeded in this. Basically, in this school, we had a lot of Olim from Ethiopia. We had a lot of different students from different areas. And there was a lot of work to do. And it was a religious girls' school. And everyone was telling me, that's it. You've just killed your career. And it was intense in the beginning. But I saw these students, and I said, I want them to have an equal opportunity. And I want them to feel great about themselves, and we're gonna roll it up and do it. And I had an amazing staff, because wherever I'm at, if I don't have a good staff, it's not going to work. It's not Brenda's, it's the staff. Also in the other school, a very, very committed staff. And for 10 years, we started with 100 students. I finished with almost 450. We had won 3 national awards.
Who are you, Brenda?
No, because so people will say, who are you, right? I'm just very focused. I don't get fabobbled from the noise. And I have an ego, but I don't get too much into it. I get into what the vision is. If my job is to make these kids, the next generation, to be better, then that's what I'm working on. I'm not looking at this. This is the next generation of Israel. So we as a staff, we have a lot to do. And that's what focuses me. So I don't get up into all the craziness. It doesn't interest me. I say to my teachers, is this noise, or is this going to help us get these kids to the next place? It's noise, and forget it. So they're saying what they're saying. What do I care? It's noise. It's not bringing me to where I need to get those kids. And it didn't always succeed. We had horrible situations and good situations, so it shouldn't be like it's all the Cinderella book. It isn't. I really work. My husband's very supportive. My children were very supportive to have a career. My son would say, you're at home, but you're not really at home. There are prices that you pay with that.
How many kids do you have?
I have 3 boys.
I'm sure sometimes your mind was somewhere else, thinking
most of the time my mind
problem solving.
Look, on the one hand, you're problem solving for issues that are coming up now. And on the other hand, you have to be thinking 14 steps ahead. How are you going to get this school? How are you going to build its name? How are you going to build, make sure that the alumni love the school and come back? How are you going to be working? In other words, I was next to one of the top schools in Israel, in Sevilla. And so me and Racheli, the Menahelet there, we started working together and started recruiting students together instead of being against one another. Wow. In other words, how do you collaborate with people and make them feel good and like go for the big picture, not for the little picture. And like, I'm tough. I mean, I'm very clear what I want to do. I can't say I didn't cry. I cried a lot, right? There was a lot of times I cried. Unfortunately, my last year, after 10 years, I decided I had done what I needed to do. I always said to myself, when I get to 450 students, that's what I need to do. I'm finished. I got to 400 in like 49. I said, that's time for me to go. And that year, Nachal Tzafit, there was a major flash flood in the desert. And 2 of my students were there getting ready for what they wanted to do for their gap year to the Army.
This was in 2018?
Right.
So you just left?
I just left. And one of my students was killed and her friend next to her, start crying, lived. And so that's how I finished. Basically, Ela Or, Zichrona Livracha, died in April 25th. And I finished June 20th. And, that was one of the most intense experiences, how you manage a school, how you finish up, how you do the mourning process, how you manage an extreme, how you manage Iran, Rav Nifgeim. I don't know how you say that in English, but
mass casualty incident.
Casualties and still make sure everybody does their bagrut when the girls are saying, Elah's not doing her matriculation, so we're not going to do it, and you have to explain that. How do you get her mother to help you when she's sitting Shiva to talk to these girls to say, you have to, guys, do your matriculations. So that is, we had a few extremes, things that have happened in my, things of being a principal, but even more extreme than that. But that's basically, that's really intense. And
your kids didn't go to the school?
No. My kids one of my kids dropped out of school in 9th grade, which I always thank him because of him I understood parents whose kids were not doing so well. And I would say to the parents, "Why, you look exhausted." And they go, "How do you know?" They would start crying. I said, "Because I'm in the same situation as you are. What do you think? My kids are, he's great. He's an amazing kid." But
and in terms of I'm just curious, your Hebrew, at what point did your Hebrew just become equal to an Israeli, that you're just okay, this is it, I'm an Israeli and I could have any conversation with anyone about anything?
I think when I became a first grade teacher more, and not the first 3 years because I was verbobbled. I think after 5 years, I started feeling, but I really worked on my vocabulary. That means if one thing I could say to people who live in Israel who want to make Aliyah, or make sure you have a strong vocabulary. How you work with the tenses afterwards, you'll figure it out. Yeah. But if you don't have a vocabulary, you'll always sound like a first grade. And the minute you have that vocabulary and you can use it, then that already gives you a 4 when you're talking.
Wow, then I need to hear that.
Yeah.
No, I think Sarah's, as you said in the beginning, she's a bit more in the American enclaves than I am. Yeah. So I just go for it. Doesn't, I sound sometimes like a first grader. Sometimes I could sound like a 10th grader. I think you just have to keep working at it and be confident about it. And I also call people in the wrong tenses. Now my son who's in 2nd grade corrects me, and I'm happy about it. And
and you're like, oh, I said that wrong.
Just be confident, Sarah. You can do it.
This is not about me.
I know it's hard for you.
If this podcast was about me, I would have a lot to say on this subject. We're going to keep the focus on Brenda. But I do have to say, Amy, the first time I met you, which was quite a few years ago, I thought you were Israeli.
Yeah, so there you go.
But my bad.
No, but I would say even in what areas that interest you. So politics interests me. So I know the words in politics. Now I'm United Hatzalah, so now I know how to words in.
Good segue.
We need
a segue.
So when did you join United Hatzalah?
So in 2018 I went into pension, and immediately I went into politics. I'm a city council.
Of course you are.
Right? No, but I have to say that was a humbling experience. That's humbling. Because here I was, I was a principal over 100 staff. I got the prizes. I'm all good, whatever. And then you go into politics, and they couldn't care less who you are. And if you're a threat, they're going to make you into nothing. And you're like, really? I'm helping the city. Come on. So learning to play that took me a long time. I'm in the suicide prevention area. I'm working that, and we're doing really interesting stuff in the city about that.
Who's the mayor now?
Benny Casriel was the mayor for 25 years. Yeah. So he's a long time. He's done an amazing job. And so we worked with changing the Moetza Datit on the, how do you say Moetza Datit?
Religious council.
The religious council. We've got women in there, so I'm very proud about that politically. And so I was doing that, and then I started my doctorate, and someone said, they put out, Nitanel, or wonderful Rosh Sniff said, put out a call for a course on learning how to be EMT. EMT, right? First responder. I
When
don't know
was this? What year?
2018, 19. And I'm like not great with medical emergencies. Like, it's not something like, I'm like, medical insurance. Okay, I'm going. Let me call someone to help. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it's time to deal with that fear.
Maybe because of what happened in with the girls in the desert.
It could be that we had a grandson that passed away. Maybe could be. I don't know. Just felt like I don't want to be helpless. Maybe sure. I don't want to be helpless. And so I did the course, and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, and I just started going into it and dealing with the fear factor. Like, what do you do when all of a sudden you're first one there and you see somebody needs to have a defibrillator, and you're like, oh my God, I'm by myself, That's still a fear moment. And I started getting into it, and then I was asked, they started with the resilient group, the Chosen. I don't know how you would say that.
Psychotrauma crisis.
The psychotrauma, I'll have to remember that one. That's all. I'll have to write
Plus,
down.
that's much easier.
Yeah.
So when did you graduate as a medic?
I would say 2019, 20.
And then when did you
right
join
before
psychotrauma?
COVID?
That was like last year they started it up again.
So
a year.
you're a psychotrauma responder as well?
Right.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about your experiences as a medic and being part of United Hatzalah?
Yeah. Well, first thing, it's such it's that idea that they go, look, you have MADA, but the Hatzalah really wants you to be the first 90 seconds. They want you to be the first ones there, because sometimes it takes time to the ambulance, or there isn't an ambulance, because they're doing other important things. So where you are and how you become part of that, you're helping your community save lives. So, I'm across the street, and my neighbors know that they'll call me and they'll say, or there's something there, I'm there, and I'm helping my community, and I'm helping people in need. And as a woman, a lot of times there's only men first responders, and a lot of times I'm the only woman. And then when we're dealing with women, so I also have that ability to help her with her, if there's situations that aren't, sensitive, and a lot of times the men will say, Brenda, can you do this, and can you do that? And I feel really good about that woman has someone to be there to help her and talk to me and say some things under her breath, or if her husband isn't well, she'll come and say something to me, and then I can pass it on. That's number one. Number two is the community, that the group of first responders, we've also are a community, and how we help each other, and we, enjoy being together. So it's like another little community within the community. And, in Ma'aleh Adumim, there was basically just MADA, which is, we do very well together with them. But we started building our group, and now people know us. And
meaning your chapter of Ma'aleh Adumim?
Chapter, right. Sorry. I don't know.
How many people are in the chapter?
20, 30. I actually don't know so much. But now we just have another course. So it's another 20 people learning. And it's really good, just that's number one. Number two is this organization, it looks outside of itself. It sees where people need help, and then they're there. So if you're looking at the psychotrauma, what's it called?
Unit,
the psychotraumatic unit. So now MADA in Ma'aleh Adumim will say, where's Brenda, or where's the people that are in that group? And then we're there. And so it's already, they understand that trauma group is important. And they saw that there was a blind spot, and that Yichud Hatzalah saw that. And then it really makes a difference, because you're not only helping people when they're physically, you're dealing with the emotions and the traumas that going on with that scene that's happening at that moment.
And it probably gives you a lot of insight as a city council member, because you're meeting so many more people in Ma'aleh Adumim from going to different calls, whether medical or psychotrauma. So how do you, and then you said you're in the suicide prevention.
So unfortunately, obviously, we have suicides in Ma'aleh Adumim, like in every city. And thank God, the mayor, where in the beginning nobody wanted to talk about it, he now has come to the plate, and he talks about it. And we really worked with him saying, if you don't talk about it, doesn't mean it's not there. Right. So because of Yichud Hatzalah, I was watching these situations happen. And I said, we need a, sorry, this is my Hebrew. This is why I don't know. There's like a unification, a hamal, you know, like an emergency group that when there is a situation like that, all the different departments that need to know, they know about it, and then they can make joint decisions on how to deal with it for the communities that have been affected.
Could you give us a story that either relates to everything you're saying with suicide or not? Meaning, like, could you just bring it down to a practical story, something that moved you, something that you remember for life? Maybe you're in touch with them still, whether it was, you know, a medical issue or a psychological issue. With people from the Hatzalah? Yeah. So a call that you went on. So recently I went on a call where a 27-year-old man was found dead. Obviously it wasn't clear if it was suicide or other issues. It was complicated. And I decided there were people working on it. By the time I got there pretty quickly, but I felt like that I needed to be more with the mother who worked in a hospital and be with the family downstairs while they were working on him. Because she understood, in other words, a lot of times people don't understand when they say you're working on somebody, they don't understand what that means or they're doing everything. But she understood that the chances of him coming out of this were practically nil. She got it. So I felt like I needed to be with her and just really work with her. On the one hand, you know, she was yelling like, I understand what's going on, and just working with them. And then at one point, the sister came in, and I had just created a group to help with, we now have an apartment for women who have special needs. It's like, it's an apartment in the community where, I don't know how you would say it. A group home? Yeah, group home. And I had just been working on getting women to volunteer in that group. And all of a sudden the sister said to me, oh, Brenda, I'm in that group. I didn't know who she was. In the group home as a consumer? As
trying to be a volunteer to help be in the group home. Okay. And she's looking at me. She goes, Brenda, you're working on the group home. And then I said her name, and I said, you're doing that. So basically, I was in this extreme situation with her. She's losing her brother. And I'm trying to help them organize it. At the same time, the city from the securities asking me to help in different areas also. And this woman who I had never met, but we had been on WhatsApp together, trying to volunteer for the group home. And I just felt like, look how many different areas that I'm meeting. And later, we've kept in touch even more. I'm working with her with her brother and how she's dealing with it, and somehow getting her back and helping that she start volunteering in the group home. So, that feeling of, as I said before, where you create realities and help people in those moments. And, one of my neighbors, her husband died, and every time she sees me, she always says to me, thank you for being with me when I was there. So that feeling of that you're that moment, and as someone who's gone through extreme, unfortunately, situations, you understand how important it is that somebody's there who's watching you and seeing you and knowing where to help you move along. So I do want to say, because when our grandson passed away, when our grandson passed away, the first people who came were Hatzalah. The whole building is Hatzalah. Now, they couldn't have saved Shimi, Zichronah Livracha, but they were there. And I think that was another reason why I decided to join as Hakarat Tov to these people that helped my daughter-in-law at that moment. I mean, she was brave.
Are you able to share with us the story?
Yeah, for sure.
Whatever it is that you feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, sharing. Obviously. Our grandson was born. It was 7 years ago. It was mamash now, his birthday, and he was sick. Something was wrong, and the doctors couldn't really figure out what was going on. My daughter and I were talking about the night before what we needed to do. We had to rethink what's going on. He was about 3 months old. I don't even remember so much anymore. And in the morning, I said to her I was going to come. I was a principal, And in the morning, I always waited at the gate every morning to see the kids in the school. And in the morning, my husband came to me and said, Shimi passed away. And, we were in shock because we had already realized that something else had to be happening now. And so as I was calling, the Hatzalah had come immediately. They just, everybody came in their pajamas. My son was in davening. And they were trying to do, life resuscitation.
Where is this?
In Telstone. And it wouldn't. There was nothing they could have done really. But she was talking to Hatzalah, and they were telling her what to do also. And it gave her a sense of. I get emotional, but it gave her a sense of being able to help herself. And that sense. We came there pretty quickly afterwards. And, I have a lot of advice on those situations. I think it's helped me also in those situations to tell my chapter in Hatzalah, in Ma'aleh Adumim, what you should be doing in those situations. But, no one should know. But that sense that they were there and that community was there and that they were supportive afterwards was crucial in their getting back into life and being healthy. It takes years to get healthy after that.
It's so hard.
So hard. And there was young children there in the house at the time. In other words, it wasn't just her and the baby. It was my other grandchildren were there.
You all experienced
They were all experiencing this trauma. To this day, one of my grandsons who loves it, I'm in Hatzalah, goes, I can't do it. I'll pass out, Safta. But I understand it's from that basic trauma. It's from there. So I think, and they didn't have Chosin at the time. They didn't have the psychotrauma thing. And the minute they saw us from the social services, they said, okay, the family has support system. But there was a lot of things that we didn't know at the time. And I know today, fortunately and unfortunately. So I think the fact that Hatzalah was there and they made such a difference to making us feel that someone was helping us, I think that was also a jump start for me being part of this wonderful Irgun. And now I'm volunteering in emergency. I'm in pension, so I have time. So, I'm in emergency in Har Tzofim. And,
What do you mean? You're in
they have
hospital program?
Hospital program.
Oh, you volunteer in the emergency room.
Right. And so
Hatzalah has a program where volunteers can spend time in the emergency room helping out the staff.
And learning EKGs and all that fun stuff. And so I think that experience that we experienced when Shimi, passed away and that Hatzalah was there, I understand, that feeling of what it is to be in that shock and not knowing what you're looking at and not how do you even wrap your head around that. So I take that with me where I go and,
we have so little time, and I don't know what to do because I want to ask you so many more things. I want to spend just a few minutes, and I know we can spend an entire hour or 2 or 3 or 4 on your trip to Moldova. But if we can just really dip into it what was the takeaway? How long were you there for? Just the facts. You were there for how long?
I wasn't there that long. Actually, I got a call on Motzei Shabbos on Saturday night, and they said, you have a half an hour to tell us if you're coming or not. We need you for 3-4 days. Can you come? And I'm like, can I just talk to my husband about it? I'm like, oh, okay, forget my husband. I'm going to go.
As a psychotrauma volunteer?
As a psychotrauma, right.
With Sharon Slater, you went? Because she was on our last podcast, so maybe
they weren't there this
I have no idea. Okay. I was in this, I have no idea.
No, different trips.
Right. I was there for 3-4 days.
The most significant takeaway.
First thing, flying into a no-air zone. After I told you that I had been hit by a lightning, so I'm like, I hope I'm not hit by a missile. We're 20 people on a plane, and they're telling us where to sit so the plane won't flip over. I'm like, my 60 kilos is going to make a difference if the plane flips or not. Okay, that's the fun part. I think the most, 2 different things. Number 1, to see how many people leave everything to help other people. That's number 1.
Including you.
Okay. Number 2 is my husband is his mother was a Holocaust survivor. That sense of feeling that people who saved my mother-in-law, here I can help save other people in that situation. And that was very emotional for me. I love my mother-in-law very much. And that's number 2. Number 3 was we went to the refugee camps. And we're walking in, and the people in Achudza, not everyone's religious. You have from all works of life and all different people, Arab, Jews, religious, non-religious. We're all going there, and it's total quiet, except for the dogs running around, because the people had to decide whether to take their suitcase or their animal, and obviously people took their animals, not their suitcases, right? And so it's total quiet. And I said to one of the doctors, he goes, okay, everything looks okay. And I'm like, this is not good quiet. This is trauma quiet. And I said, we're going to go bed by bed, and we're going to talk to these people. And we went bed by bed. In the beginning, the few women, and it's mostly only women because no men are there. And the first few women said, no, they're fine. And then this one woman said, can you check my blood? It was hard to communicate until we.
How did you communicate?
They had translators with us, but they were doing a lot of different things too. And we started talking and taking their blood pressures and going through their medicines, because if you take your statins and you're running out, then you're in danger too. We went through all their medicines, and then they're telling us the stories. My father decided to stay with his family. I'm a single mother. I took my mother with me. How did I leave my father? We wrote on the car, don't shoot. There's a baby in the car, on the car. The sense of I left my father and my grandmother. How am I here? What am I doing? Is this right? Working with that. Working with women whose houses were blown up while they were in the house. And all of a sudden you have an 80-year-old woman taking off her clothing in an area where there's no privacy. Immediately, because I'm a first responder, I immediately say, let's cover her up. Like, you know what to do. And she's saying, I can't stop shaking. And the doctor's saying, it's probably from the trauma and not from the physical. And just working with these women. And in the beginning, I said the women didn't want us to help, but by the end, they were asking us to work with them. And so how important it is working with people in that trauma where they can talk to somebody and say, can you check my medicine? Can you look at my arm? And can I tell you what happened to me?
Look at my soul.
Can you look at my soul? And to make sure that they're getting food from the amazing cooks from United Hatzalah, and I don't eat anywhere, and I was even eating their food, and just giving these people a sense of hope, and then coming back with these. When
I saw you at the airport,
right,
you were
right,
a mother to a baby, her 5-6-year-olds.
No, her daughter was 6.
And
a baby. And there was another woman that I was working with that I don't think you saw me with. And then as an Olah Hadasha, going back to Aliyah. So these women didn't have their passports. And then they're meeting people who say, what do I do? They don't have a passport. And I'm sitting here thinking, I remember what it was like for me when I had to deal with making Aliyah, and they were tough. And I looked at this woman who was saying, what do I do? She doesn't have a passport. And she wasn't smiling. I said, just smile at the woman first. Look at her. Smile at her. And then I called someone from Hatzalah. They say, what do? We don't have a passport. And then just working with these children. And also being able to say to some of the people who were saying, let's push ahead in the line because we want to do our PCR and it's taking you time. And I can say, stay back. You are not skipping line now. We're just protecting these people from that sense of the difficulties that it is to make Aliyah. And so coming back with them and that child and those children and knowing their husbands, I don't know if you knew this, their husbands were in Nikolai that was being bombed.
Yeah.
And so when we were taking off, she was crying. She was scared of flying. I was crying because I understood that she was living the life that she knew and basically understanding that your life changed within a second.
She might never see her husband.
And I was witnessing that what it is that when your life changed for a second and how wonderful it is in Israel that we can do these things and how United Hatzalah basically was the first responder in the world to make a difference and say, we're here, we see you, you're not transparent. And that thing saying you're not transparent is what makes people saves lives emotionally and obviously physically.
I think you did an amazing job making a full circle, bringing us back to the beginning, full circle, where really you're ending exactly where we started, that these refugees are coming to Israel as new Olim, trying to start their life over, having left everything behind. And, you know, I want to leave off today with a sense of what Israel means to you today, 35 years later. How many years are you here?
40. I didn't get
later.
married immediately.
Okay.
I had a few years in between. 40 years.
40 years you're in Israel. You are fully integrated, style, sandals and all.
Yeah.
And, you know, here you are watching these people come through the airport, starting their experience 40 years later. Just, you know, in the honor of Yom Ha'atzmaut, tell us a little bit, like, where are you holding today? And what are your thoughts on your love for Israel and watching this country, this state grow? You know, I don't even have words the way it's grown in the last 40 years.
Right.
You could tell me much more than I can.
The toilet paper is no longer crepe.
There
It's
Waiting
soft.
for one of those comments.
Nothing like the change of the toilet paper to know that Israel's gotten
Paper towels still aren't amazing, but it's okay.
You know, look, there's a lot of difficulties in this country, and there's a lot of things that can always improve. But the fact that, you know, we're always thinking how to move, you know, a few steps ahead, and how we're always worried about how we become the best that we can be with all the difficulties. It's complicated. We're in a complicated school. I mean, I work with Bedouin principals in the Negev. Okay, I mean, I was in a non what's it called? You know, I was in a settlement there that's like totally like crazy. But the fact that we're constantly thinking how in Israel we can join and work and create something healthy with all the difficulties, that spirit in my mind is what's really important, is that we've got this sense of that we can make a difference in the world, and we can, through dialogue, find solutions, even though we're always fighting. But, you know, when there's quiet, there's no dialogue. And when we're dealing with things and fighting and not agreeing, there's dialogue. And in my mind, that's what Israel is. It's a constant state of dialogue, and trying to find how to make this place be the best it can be. And I think for me, Israel is just, it's being here as something that we're here for thousands of years, and that this place has its holiness and its meaning, its energy is to bring good to the world. And you know, sometimes we have to improve ourselves. Obviously, we make mistakes, but that energy is always how to make it better, how to do better, how to be better people, how to work on our midot. And it's not always easy, but that's what we're here to do. So,
do you have a message to people who are not living in Israel, either out of choice or circumstance? I've learned to differentiate between people who really want to be here and can't, and they have legitimate reasons. That took me years, because I used to be like, everyone, Aliyah, today, you have no excuse, there's no reason. My mother is the perfect example. She would be here yesterday, you know, years ago, and she literally has real reasons why she can't be here. And they're very valid and they're very legitimate. So there are people out of circumstance that can't be here, and that's one category. And then there are people out of choice that say, no, I'm comfortable, whatever. I don't want to live in Israel for whatever reasons. So those are two different categories. But either you can give maybe two messages to each one, or just in general advice or a comment to those that are not living in Israel from an American who made that move, who started from scratch, who built up, who was a pioneer, 40 years here. What do you have to say to the people not living in Israel?
You know, I think everybody has to choose where they will do their best life. You know, I believe that God put us on this world at the time he put every individual, because they have something to do. I wasn't born 100 years ago because I had nothing to do 100 years ago. And I obviously won't be here in another 100 years because I have nothing to do in another 100 years. So wherever you are, you make sure two things. Number one, that you create your life, you take hold of your life, and you make sure not only that you know, in the Mishnah it says, which is, you know, first, if I'm not for myself, then who am I? Make sure that you create the best life with the values that are important to you. But if you're only for yourself, if you can't get out of yourself, then really just being for yourself is not really worth it. So how do you integrate between looking at what you need? And that's the first thing. It doesn't say help others. It says first help yourself. Make sure you're doing your best life with its problems, with its difficulties. I've not had an easy run in a lot of different areas, but I know what the values that I want to live my life by. That's number one. Number two is, what does it look like when you're helping other people? What does that mean? Does it mean that you're in a group like United Hatzalah? Does that mean that you're making sure that you're calling all the old people in your community and saying, how are you doing? What does it look like? Make sure that you describe what does it look like, and then go for it. And make sure that the noise doesn't get into you and that your ego doesn't get into you, because that is a real game stopper, the ego. It's a real game stopper. No one noticed me, didn't notice me, and I deal with that too. I mean, that's number one. Number two. Number three is just do it. I always say that is the first Nike commercial. You know? Just do it. In other words, don't find excuses to make those two things work. So if you're in America, and that's where you're happy, and that's where you're good for you, do it. So then where do you make your community better? Where do you make your family better? How do you deal with the problems that you have, right? Where do you put the values? What do you say in your family if you're having problems with your marriage or having problems with your children? I mean, I had a kid who dropped out of 9th grade. I mean, how do I deal with that? Does that make me a failure, not a failure? Where do you feel that you're not helpless and that you can help yourself? That's number one. And number two is, where do you help your community? And just make the decision what it looks like and then make it happen. I do believe that when you verbalize things, you create your reality. You have to be verbalized. And you might not get it the first year and you might not get it the second year, but just don't give up on it. For the people who want to come here, in other words, those are the people living in America, enjoy, do well, make your communities better, make yourself better, just do it. Don't give the reasons why you can't. For the people that want to come here, and, you really have to deal with the fear factor. In other words, what are your fears, and who are the people and who are the help that can help you deal with those fears? And I think everything comes to that fear. And then who are the people and who are the communities and who are yourself that can help you deal with those fears? And then once you deal with the fears, slowly you work into it. But I think being in Israel, it brings up a lot of insecurities.
Absolutely. And
a lot of fears. And so what's the worst that can happen? You look stupid. So what? I look stupid sometimes. I don't like looking stupid, though. It makes it not so comfortable, but what can you do?
But I've taken so much from you, Brenda, that you really face your fears, you take on challenges, you're not afraid, and you really...
I am afraid, but
you are afraid, but you go, it seems that you go into it in a humbling way. You don't let your ego take over too much. You really push, and look where it's gotten you today. You've done so many amazing things for your community. I'm trying to think, what can I do for my community?
I'm really blown away by you in so many different areas. Personally, I just feel like I took a lot from you talking about not being afraid. I mean, I didn't get into my story, but I'm the exact opposite of you. I am someone who came here knowing that I needed to be in Israel, wanted to be in Israel from a very young age. My mother said goodbye to me when I went to seminary. That was it. Aliyah, rah, all the way. And then I got here and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I hate Hebrew. I don't like the culture. And I don't like falafel, and I can't deal with the bureaucratic system, and I was very bitter, and I still am bitter in many ways. I still have resentments against, the country of Israel. And when I got divorced, I was very much pushed, why don't you go back to mommy, go back home where it's easier. And I pushed through that too. I said, no, Israel's where we belong. But I've never integrated the way you have. My Hebrew is embarrassing beyond belief.
Never too late.
It is not, Sarah. You just need to try. You're good.
And it's just, listening to you say just if you want to make it happen, I want to make it happen, for me was really chizuk. How do you say chizuk? It was really empowering. So thank you so much. And just on behalf of, what should I say? On behalf of all of the Ukrainians and all of Israel and all the citizens of Ma'aleh Adumim.
We're very lucky we have Brenda.
Thank you.
Really, you're incredible. And thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity. And, that strength that you guys are giving out there is crucial. It's crucial. this podcast is crucial for other people, to hear.
I'm sure everyone's going to gain a lot from listening to you today. So Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach.
Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to the United Humans podcast.
Share this with a friend, subscribe, and we already know you're going to leave us a positive review, so we'll just thank you now for that.
Bye.
Adios.